Let me ask you a question. What does success look like to you? Is it a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood? A luxury vacation that makes people stop scrolling? A car that makes you feel like you finally made it? Or a social media profile that quietly tells the world, I have my life together? Most people think the answer changes from generation to generation. But it doesn't. Because for decades, people have been making the exact same financial mistake. They just make it in different ways. One generation chased houses, another generation chased lifestyle, another generation chased experiences. And today, many people chase aesthetics. The symbols changed, the pressure changed, the platforms changed, but the trap stayed the same. Different costumes, same financial illusion. And the most dangerous part is this. When you are inside the trap, it does not feel like a trap at all. It feels like progress. It feels like reward. It feels like success. And if you are not careful, you may already be living inside it without even realizing it. The strange thing about money is that most of our financial goals are not actually created by us. We like to believe they are. We tell ourselves that the life we want is entirely our own idea, that the targets we chase came from our own values, our own dreams, our own decisions. But if you look closely enough, something interesting begins to appear. Most of those goals were already waiting for us long before we arrived. They were handed down, quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. We inherited them from our parents, from our friends, from the culture we grew up inside, and from the world that constantly showed us what success was supposed to look like. For one generation, success meant owning a home. Not just any home, a home that proved you had made it. A home that signaled stability, security, and achievement. For another generation, success looked different. It became a lifestyle, a better car, a bigger house, more upgrades, more comfort, more proof that your income was moving upward. And then came another generation, a generation that watched traditional milestones become harder and harder to reach. So instead of collecting assets, many began collecting experiences, trips, restaurants, concerts, memories, moments worth sharing, moments worth remembering. And today, the picture has evolved again. Success may look like the perfect apartment, the perfect desk setup, the perfect morning routine, the perfect social media feed, a lifestyle carefully curated for an audience that may not even exist in real life. The details change, the symbols change, the trends change, but the pattern stays exactly the same. Every generation is given a picture, a vision of what a successful life should look like. And most people spend years, sometimes decades, trying to make their lives match that picture. Not because they are foolish, not because they are irresponsible, but because nobody ever stopped to ask a simple question. Did I choose this goal? Or was this goal chosen for me? Here is where the problem begins. Not with spending, not with ambition, not even with wanting a better life. The problem begins when we confuse looking wealthy with actually being wealthy, because those two things are not the same. And in today's world, they often move in completely different directions. A person can live in a beautiful house, a house that impresses neighbors, a house that looks successful from the street, and still lie awake at night worrying about bills, debt, and retirement. A person can drive a luxury car, the kind of car that turns heads at every traffic light, the kind of car that makes strangers assume they are rich, and yet have very little money invested anywhere that actually grows. Another person can travel across countries, fill their passport with stamps, fill their phone with photos, fill their social media with unforgettable moments, and still own very few assets that will support them 10 years from now. And today, there is an even stranger version of the same story. Someone can post about investing every day, talk about financial freedom, talk about compound interest, talk about building wealth, and still barely be building any wealth at all, because the world is extremely good at celebrating visible success. Visible success is easy to understand. You can see the house, you can see the car, You can see the vacation, you can see the designer apartment, you can see the lifestyle, and because you can see it, you assume it represents wealth. But real wealth works differently. Real wealth is often invisible. Nobody sees your index fund quietly growing in the background. Nobody sees the retirement account you've been contributing to for years. Nobody sees the emergency fund sitting patiently in a savings account. Nobody sees the investments that are compounding while you sleep. Nobody sees the financial discipline that created them. Because real wealth rarely demands attention. It doesn't need to be photographed. It doesn't need to be posted. It doesn't need to be admired. It simply grows, quietly, month after month, year after year. And that is what makes this trap so dangerous. The appearance of wealth is visible. The reality of wealth is hidden. One gets applause. The other builds freedom. And every day, without realizing it, millions of people choose the thing that looks wealthy instead of the thing that actually creates wealth. Most people believe their financial problems will disappear the moment they start earning more money. And honestly, that belief makes sense. When you're struggling financially, more income seems like the obvious solution. If you had a bigger paycheck, surely life would become easier. Surely the stress would disappear. Surely the financial pressure would finally go away. And sometimes it does. Sometimes a higher income genuinely improves a person's situation. But often, something very different happens. Something so common that it quietly affects millions of people without them even noticing. Because every raise comes with a new temptation. The moment income goes up, a new version of success suddenly becomes available. A bigger house, a nicer car, a better neighborhood, more expensive restaurants, more subscriptions, more convenience, more upgrades, more reasons to spend. And none of these decisions feel irresponsible. In fact, most of them feel completely justified. After all, you worked hard for the raise. You earned it. You deserve to enjoy it. And that's exactly where the trap begins. Because as income rises, lifestyle rises right alongside it. The new car payment replaces the old one. The larger mortgage replaces the smaller one. The upgraded lifestyle slowly becomes the new normal. And after a while, something strange happens. The extra money disappears. Not because it vanished, but because your expenses quietly expanded to absorb it. The paycheck becomes bigger, but the financial freedom you expected never fully arrives. The gap between earning and spending stays surprisingly similar, only the numbers are larger. This is why some people earning six figures still feel stressed about money. This is why high-income professionals can feel trapped despite making more than they ever imagined. From the outside, their lives look successful. The house is bigger. The car is nicer. The vacations are better. The lifestyle appears impressive. But underneath the surface, very little has changed. Because they improved their lifestyle without improving their wealth. They upgraded consumption without upgrading ownership. They increased spending without increasing freedom. And over time, that difference becomes enormous. Because wealth is not created by how much money passes through your hands. Wealth is created by how much of that money stays, grows, and works for you long after it is earned. What makes this trap so powerful is not that it looks dangerous. It's the opposite. It looks reasonable. In fact, it often looks responsible. That's why so many intelligent people walk straight into it. Because the trap rarely arrives disguised as a bad decision. It usually arrives disguised as a good one. A decision that makes sense. A decision that feels earned. A decision that feels completely justified. And that is what makes it so difficult to recognize. Think about it. The homeowner believes the house is security. And honestly, there is truth in that. A home can provide stability. A home can protect a family. A home can become a valuable asset over time. The problem isn't the house itself. The problem is when the house becomes the entire plan. The traveler believes experiences are living. And there is truth in that too. Some experiences create memories that last forever. Some journeys genuinely change who we are. The problem isn't the trip. The problem is when experiences quietly replace asset building. The spender believes rewards are justified. After all, they worked hard. They sacrificed. They earned the promotion. They earned the raise. Of course they deserve something nice. And perhaps they do. The problem begins when every reward becomes a permanent expense. And then there is the social media user. The person who believes presentation matters. And in many ways, it does. The way we present ourselves affects opportunities, relationships, business, careers. The problem is when the image becomes more important than the reality behind it. Notice something interesting. None of these beliefs are completely wrong. Not one of them. And that is exactly why the trap survives generation after generation. Because if the ideas were obviously foolish, people would avoid them. If the mistakes were clearly visible, people would stop making them. But this trap hides somewhere much deeper. It hides inside decisions that feel normal, decisions that society encourages, decisions that friends applaud, decisions that receive likes, compliments, and approval. Most financial mistakes become obvious after the damage is done. People can look back and say, "That was a bad investment. That was a bad loan. That was a bad decision." But this trap is different, because while it is happening, it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like progress. It feels like growth. It feels like moving forward. And that is what makes it one of the most dangerous financial traps of all. The closer you get to it, the more it feels like success. So, how do people escape? After all the traps, after all the distractions, after all the decades spent chasing the wrong signals, how do some people finally break free? The answer is surprisingly simple. Not easy, but simple. They learn to separate signals from substance. They learn the difference between looking successful and becoming successful, because those are not always the same thing. Most people spend years asking a question that sounds harmless. How can I look like I'm doing well? How can I look successful? How can I look wealthy? And without realizing it, that single question quietly shapes every financial decision they make, the house they buy, the car they drive, the vacations they take, the lifestyle they maintain. Everything becomes part of a performance designed to communicate success. But the people who eventually build real wealth ask a different question, a much more powerful question. How can I become financially stronger? Not richer overnight, not more impressive, not more admired, stronger. Because strength is what creates freedom. And once that question changes, everything else begins to change with it. Instead of upgrading their lifestyle first, they build assets first. Instead of spending first, they invest first. Instead of consuming first, they save first. Instead of chasing immediate rewards, they give their money time to compound, quietly, patiently, year after year. While everyone else is busy upgrading appearances, they are upgrading ownership. And that difference may seem small at first, almost invisible, but over time it becomes enormous. Because every dollar invested is a worker. Every asset is a future paycheck. Every investment is a small piece of financial freedom being built in the background. And eventually, something remarkable happens. The assets become large enough to support the lifestyle. The investments begin paying for the upgrades. The wealth begins funding the freedom. And that is the point most people never reach, because they reverse the order. They try to use lifestyle to create wealth, when the truth works the other way around. Real wealth should fund the lifestyle. The lifestyle should not consume the wealth. Assets first, lifestyle second. That simple shift is what separates people who look wealthy for a few years from people who become wealthy for a lifetime. Every generation has its own version of the trap. A different symbol, a different pressure, a different story they were told to believe. But every generation also has people who escape it, not because they were luckier, not because they earned more, not because they never wanted a better life. They escaped because they saw the trap clearly. They understood that looking successful and becoming successful are not the same thing. And the people who win financially are usually not the ones who look richest first. They are not always driving the newest car. They are not always living in the biggest house. They are not always posting the most impressive lifestyle. They are the ones quietly building in the background, quietly saving, quietly investing, quietly buying assets, quietly letting time do the work, while everyone else is busy building appearances. They are building ownership, while everyone else is chasing applause. They are building freedom. And in the end, that difference matters more than almost anything, because there is a huge difference between looking like you have made it and actually making it.